Parallel on America's Haunted Highway, it's Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange.
Welcome everybody to the Pixelated Paranormal Halloween special. Ooh, spooktacular. Yeah, so as promised, guys, we've got some terrifying tales to frighten, and we hope we make it worth your while for checking us out. Happy Halloween, number one. Happy Halloween, everybody. Hopefully we survived the clown apocalypse that was supposed to happen on the 30th. I guess we won't know. If you're listening to this, then congratulations. We made it, I suppose. So yeah, we got a little Halloween special. We've got a amalgam of different things. We've got haunted houses, werewolves, ghost stories, alien stories. We've even got a really awesome listener story that got sent in to us, so we'll be able to play that for you guys shortly. But first and foremost, I've got some old news. I was perusing through paranormal news for something to throw into the show, and I found a report from the 1960s entitled The Strange Tale of an X-Rated Haunting. Have you ever heard of this before? Albeit vague. Okay, so basically in 1960, a Cambridge parapsychologist dressed in a bedsheet and attempted to haunt an audience in a movie theater. The odd thing about this is it wasn't just a basic, like theater where they were watching Grease or what have you. It was an X-rated adult theater. So, on May 28th, 1960, at precisely 7:40 p.m., this guy named Cornell attempted to haunt a cinema by wearing a bedsheet with holes cut in the top for his eyes. So, you heard me right. A man went to a porn theater while people were watching porn and dressed in a bedsheet. In a bedsheet. And attempted to see if he can get people.
Was his flagpole up at ready?
It doesn't say. That part doesn't specify, but it says that Cornell drapes himself in a white muslin sheet, fabric covering him from head to toe, and then he emerges before the unsuspecting audience, and he was bathed in a light from the projector. So I guess softly illuminated, as much as you'd expect a ghost to be. He said he moved in front of the screen from left to the right and back again, all for the name of science. It said that he was conducting a experiment in the apparitional experience, basically to see if anybody would report seeing a ghost or if it would go unnoticed. And I'm thinking, nobody probably cared about what a guy was doing in a sheet. It was probably par for the course in that type of theater. So, yeah, I think that's a really silly experiment. It sounds to me like just this guy was trying to get his rocks off and thought, you know what, I could probably get the school to pay for me to get in if I just say this is going to be a science experiment. So,
hey, speaking of which, do we have time to do a cheesy Halloween joke?
We do. Go for it.
Okay, so this guy was in a hospital, and he had just got surgery over with, and the nurse was, coming in, checking on him, and she's like, "Now, Mr. Thompson, are you okay? I'm busy, and I won't be back for a very long time." He's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm a very prideful man." And so she left, and about 40 minutes later, he heard a rumbling in his tummy, and he's like, "Oh no, this is not going good." And he's like, "Not using the bedpan, nope." And before you know it, he just fucking shits all over the place. He's got shit all over the bed, shit all over himself, and he's just embarrassed. So he goes to the bathroom, gets himself cleaned up, and then comes back, and it's just like a really bad, Army of Darkness or Evil Dead scene. His bed is just trashed, and he's really embarrassed. So he rolls the sheets up and throws them out the window, and lo and behold, they land on this poor passerby down below. And this guy's kicking and screaming and kicking at the sheets, and another person walks by, and they're like, "Hey, buddy, are you okay?" He says, "Yeah, man, I'm okay, but it looks like I beat the shit out of this ghost."
Oh, you. Oh, man. Okay, so...
All right, folks, that's the end of the show.
Thank you,
hope
and
you enjoyed
good
it.
night.
Peace out.
So, getting back to Cornell, basically, he wanted to go and do this experiment to see if anybody would be able to divert their attention and notice a ghost out of the corner of their eye. Because so many people claim that out of the corner of their eye they would see apparitions and creatures and whatnot. So he wanted to find somewhere where not only people's attention would be diverted and concentrated on one single thing, but also he chose an X-rated movie theater to safeguard against possibly scaring any children, because he didn't want to have any lawsuits or get beat up by angry parents. So there you go. And it basically says that in the end it was it was a monumental failure. None of the audience reported seeing anything remotely paranormal through the ratio.
They're too busy jerking the gherkin. They don't give a shit about no fucking ghosts.
Pretty much. So that says that many people saw nothing as usual at a rate of 46%. At a rate of 46% of the respondents had failed to notice the experimental apparition when Cornell first passed in front of the audience. 32% remained completely unaware of it. Even the projectionist, whose job was to watch for anything unusual or people petting the old one-eyed snake, didn't even happen to notice anything either. One person, however, did report seeing a woman in a coat, and another person claimed that they saw a polar bear.
Huh.
Okay, well, there's that out of the way. Broke the ice, so let's go ahead and jump into it, guys. We just got some spooky stories that we thought were interesting, stuff that we've read in the past, some stuff very well known, some not so well known, and if you're lucky, maybe even some personal accounts from Presto and I. So without further ado, Preston, why don't you start things off?
So I'm going to talk about Amityville Horror. Most people know this either A, by the 2005 Ryan Reynolds remake that they did, or by the original one that was released back in 81, 82.
Uh-huh.
The actual story itself starts off around November 13th of 1974. The original house that is at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville on the South Shore of Long Island was owned by the DeFeo family. Now, Ronald DeFeo Jr. at the time went in, shot, and killed 6 members of his family. So mom and dad and 4 of his siblings. Now, after the killing, he burst into Harry's bar, screaming that his parents had been shot. And at first, the police had labeled it as a break-in, and later they found a 35 Marlin rifle and a gun box, like the ammo box, in his room. And upon further investigation, he broke down and admitted to the murders. After a lengthy trial, he was found guilty. However, the weird thing is that there has never been a solid explanation on how one person acting alone could actually take the lives of 6 people, because each person... Now, hold on. Now, I know that sounds funny, but you have a family of 6, okay? Each one of them was found laying face down with a bullet wound to the head. And a 35 is a very loud rifle, and none of them woke up. So he basically went from room to room, shot each one of his family members in the head, and none of them ever woke up during that whole entire time.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
There was no signs, and now some people might say, well, maybe he drugged them before. Nope, toxicology showed no signs of being drugged, and there was no signs that the body have ever been moved. He basically walked in room to room while each one of them was asleep, fired the gun, and shot them all while they were sleeping. Now, it doesn't say if he ever admitted to actually hearing voices or anything like that, but in the actual movies, especially in the 2005 remake, they actually said that he was hearing voices, and the voices said, kill him, get him, catch him, kill him.
Right, catch him and kill him is what they were saying.
Catch him and kill him, and drove him to actually do it. Now, where the movie deviates, the 2005 remake deviates, is there was a little girl in that family, and the little girl was added in to add drama to the actual movie itself. So the real DeFeo family, that it wasn't like a little 6-year-old girl that got murdered. That was something that Hollywood added in. But it wasn't 13 months later that the Lutz family moved into the house, and they purchased the home December 18th, 1975, 13 months later, for a whopping $80,000.
Holy cow.
Never expecting that they would leave it all behind 28 days later. As they were moving into the home and unpacking, a Catholic priest arrives to bless the house, and upon entering the second floor, and went to the room to where Mark and John DeFeo, the two boys, had been shot, he began sprinkling holy water and heard a voice that said, "Get out." He started to experience boils forming across his hands and a burning sensation. Now, in the movies, in the 2005 remake, it wasn't until all the paranormal shit started happening that the wife called him in, and then you saw where he heard the voice in the air vent say, "Get out," and the flies came out of it and attacked him. Mm-hmm. Part of the deal where they say Amityville is a hoax roughly has to do with this priest because some of the where they say that this is all a hoax actually comes from him, because in several interviews he said that he never went to the home. It was only a telephone conversation. And then there are actual interviews in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, where they actually blurred his face and he admitted to actually going in, hearing the voice, and all these things happened. So it's kind of back and forth on what his actual ties to this situation were. From the very first night that the Lutz family moved in, they claimed they felt strange sensations, and within days, the family's personalities had drastically changed and arguments ensued. George, the father, was plagued with constant chills and spent all of his time feeding the fireplace, and George had noticed a change in his grooming habits, and Kathy's health declined drastically. And I think they both later died pretty early on. I know George died right around the time of the movie was being redone. Mm-hmm. And she died slightly before that, both of cancer, which I thought was kind of an odd little deal. The Lutz's daughter, the youngest daughter, began spending all of her time in a room playing with an imaginary friend. She described as a red-eyed pig called Jody, who could transform not only in shape but size, and at times was seen being larger than the house. Jody also claimed that
Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Yeah. Jody also claimed that she could not be seen by anyone unless she wanted them to. Mysterious foul odors would emanate from different locations of the house. Black stains appeared on the toilets and ceramic fixtures. Kathy was touched by an unseen force, and a green gelatin substance would appear throughout the house. Hundreds of flies appeared in the sewing room despite it being the dead of winter, and George would wake up roughly each night at 3:15, which coincided with the time that the police felt that the Feos were murdered. George also woke one night to witness his wife transform into a 90-year-old hag, and the next night she began levitating off the bed. The Lutz family tried numerous occasions to contact the Catholic priest, only to find that the phones would cut out whenever they would try to call. After failing to get a priest to return, the family took matters into their own hands. Armed with a crucifix, they walked throughout the house reciting the Lord's Prayer, and a chorus of voices erupted in response, asking them, "Will you stop?" The final night was reported to be the worst. Banging and rappings as loud as marching bands emanated throughout the house. Furniture began moving on its own accord, and the children were terrorized. After 28 days in the DeFeo home, the family claimed they could no longer take it, grabbed their shit, kicked rocks, and got out of there. 20 days after the Lutz fled, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, who basically have a hand in everything, were called in.
They're in everything, man. Like fucking, they're like Scooby-Doo.
And they did their own investigation, and based on their findings, basically it was turned into a book, and that's where we get a lot of our information from. The 2005 remake, where that Ketchum thing, like Catch 'em, Kill 'em.
Yeah, Jeremiah Ketchum.
That was something that actually was never really in the original book, and it really has nothing to do with the story. Again, that's something Hollywood had just added in.
Yeah.
And there was like reports of a red room. The deal
Red
with the
room. Red room.
Yeah. In the original story, there was nothing mentioned of a red room, but then it was like in later interviews, they're like, "Oh yeah, there was this red room, and whenever we went in there, it was like blood red, and shit would happen in that room."
Was there a ghost named Roxanne that kept turning on the red light?
Roxanne, you don't gotta put it on the red light. Okay, enough of that.
You're welcome, folks. You're welcome.
But yeah, it's just a little bit of different inconsistencies here and there that led people to believe that it was an actual hoax. When we get into my next story, I think we'll kind of relate back to what I think actually went on. The next family that bought it, it was just kind of an older couple. They bought it shortly after the Lutz abandoned it, and they were in that house for over 15 years, and they never once experienced any paranormal activity whatsoever.
Right. Did they say what their name was, or when they got rid of it? Was it the Fragoso family?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
They sold it in 2010 for $950,000.
Now, see,
And it
did
was
they
just
sell
recently back on the market as well.
Yeah, did they sell it for the $955,000, or was that just the asking price? Because I remember the couple that owned it, they had it on the market for what was it? The original asking price was like $1.35 million. Mm-hmm. And nobody was buying on it, and nobody was really even interested in that kind of price, because holy shit, that's a lot of money. But I think they lowered the price down to $955,000, and they claimed that it's not because the place is haunted. They were claiming that it's because they're getting a divorce. In 2001, they were claiming they were getting a divorce, and that's why they wanted to sell the house.
The house is haunted.
Okay, so go on. You got more about that?
Oh, the Amityville?
Yeah. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, that was it.
Okay, so you're right. It did actually go back up for sale again. I remember hearing, I think I heard it on Bizarre States, so shout out to those guys, great show. It was up for sale in July. Amityville Horror House went back up for sale, and it says that in this article here, Amityville Horror House for sale with no mention of its past. But what gets me is, like, I don't know anybody who doesn't know the story of that house, so I mean, I guess if you market it just as, like, whatever you want to call it, whatever the street address is, and just hope people don't realize what house it is. I'm sure there's people out there like all day long taking photos and walking past it.
I mean, the fucking Simpsons even have an episode about that house where we tried to kill the Simpson family.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's in pop culture all over the place.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, it says that, I think it sold. I'm not going to look it up and see if it sold. I'm pretty sure it did sell after a while. But yeah, the new asking price was $850,000. So, price.
Would you buy it?
Would I buy? I would buy it. If
you had the money, would you buy it?
If I had the money, I would buy it, and this might be an echo of what they said on Bizarre State, so I'm not trying to jock off their thought process here, but I think I'd buy it to preserve it. Mm-hmm. Because stuff like that, if it doesn't sell, then maybe someone's just going to buy it and demolish it, or the city could take it over and just do God knows what, or heaven forbid, squatters. Carnival.
And it has become kind of what I would call maybe like a cultural icon.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty important place, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I had the cash, I would buy it, but I don't believe I would move into it. I think I'd try to do some kind of preservation.
And what's really funny too is both movies were never filmed at that house.
Right, it's always that other iconic house. It's not the Amityville house, it's the other house.
So they were just like, one of them was filmed in Maine, and I can't remember where the original was filmed, but they're like, yeah, we'll just pick a different fucking house. So.
Right. Yeah. Man, I mean, hell, maybe I don't blame them for that, so. Well,
I think the Warrens should buy it.
I'm getting so sick of the damn Warrens. I mean, good on them for what they do, but it's like you said, they've got their fingers in everybody's pie. Like every ghost story that pops, it's the Warrens, and then Hollywood's like, wait, were the Warrens involved in that? Great, let's make a movie out of it. We'll change all the facts. We'll change everything about it. We're just going to put their names in it, and then perfect.
Well, before George Lutz died, they invited him on set for the filming of the 2005 remake.
Uh-huh.
And he got really pissed because there was a scene where, if you haven't seen the movie by now, then I don't feel bad giving a spoiler away, but Ryan Reynolds' character is hearing voices, and he goes out to the boathouse, and he thinks a kind of demonic possessed spirit is attacking him.
Right.
And he fucking just axes it to death, and it ends up being the dog. And George Lutz was like, I never killed any animals. I'm not an animal killer. And was just like really pissed off at that scene.
Yeah.
And so each time they remake this movie, and like, you know, there was Amityville Horror 2 and Amityville Horror.
The Possession and Dollhouse.
Yeah.
And Amityville 47.
So, yeah.
That becomes very monotonous.
But, you know, it's an iconic story. It's a good Halloween story to talk about. And I think it'll tie in nicely with my other story that I do later on.
You know what? If you want to jump into that one right now, just knock it out.
What was that show that, and this is what actually got me into actual ghost hunting, because this show reminded me of some of our paranormal experience. It was Paranormal Witness that was on Sci-Fi.
Yeah.
And it was season 1, episode 1. Look it up, because
what episode was it?
It was season 1, episode 1.
Are you are you sure? I'm not trolling you here. Are you sure? I felt like this episode happened later on.
It was season 1. It might have been later on in season 1. It might not have been episode 1. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, go for it, man. I'm just.
But if I remember correctly, it was called "The Man in the Attic." Was the actual name of the episode, and it took place in New Mexico. A recently divorced mother, she had a 4-year-old son, 5-year-old son at the time, a very young one, and was 5 months pregnant, and her husband had left her, and so she's got one in the oven, one out and about, single mom. And trying to go back to school, provide for her family. She found this kind of little house, not really in like a city area, but kind of like, you know, like outside of the city. So like your neighbors are like spread out, and you know, it's nice and scenic. And she buys this home. First couple months in, nothing too terrible, nothing, you know, too extravagant. But as she's doing her school studies at night, it started out that she would hear what sounded like somebody was dumping rocks in between the walls. Like she just heard this weird, like rumbling noise in between the walls. And, you know, she would put her ear up to the wall, and it would get louder and louder. And then she was like, well, maybe it's rats. You know, that's the first logical thing somebody would think, like maybe I have rats.
Right.
Calls out, the
exterminator.
You know, the pest exterminator, pest control, and they don't find anything. And a couple months go by, and you know, this is kind of the same time frame every night, like 1, 2 in the morning, as she's like trying to, you know, she's got the kids, she's to sleep, and she's just kind of like starting to do her studies and focus on that. She starts to hear this noise, and she just can't figure it out. But she's like, you know what, it is what it is. And the little neighbor girl next door, she had her over one day because she would help babysit the kids, and she's like, you know, why don't you help make me lunch, and we'll sit down and we'll have a nice lunch. And all of a sudden in the kitchen, there's this green ball of light that's just like floating in front of them. And they had like one of those old, the Kodak where you smack the photo after it prints it out for you. The kind of that instant. What were those? What were those cameras called, Sean? The Polaroid ones that would print it out after you took the photo, and you would just sit there and kind of wave it back and forth in your hand.
Just a Polaroid camera, I think, is safe to call it.
So, and this is kind of the cool thing about this show, I thought, at the time, when they had the authentic stories, you would actually get the good evidence. And they actually had this whole entire story was riddled with good evidence, and this was the first one. So they actually had the Polaroid of this fucking weird green misty light thing floating in front of them. And you have to think back to, like, this was like in the late 70s when this took place. So this is really hard to fake a photo like this. And it looked like this weird, like green, like something off of Ghostbusters, like this green blob.
Ectoplasm?
Like floating. Yeah, ectoplasm, right? And so the little girl's like, oh my God, let me see that. And she puts the camera back up to take another photo. And when she put the camera back up in the viewfinder, this face of a very like disgruntled old man was in the viewfinder, and she freaked out. And that's when things started to escalate and things started to pick up as far as paranormal activity went. There would be times where the mom would hear that rattling noise in the wall, and she would walk down the hallway to the bedrooms, and she would notice that the attic door was open, and she would feel this presence of like something watching her. And then it came to where she would wake up at night, and there would be like this force on her chest to where she couldn't move, and it got to the point to where she felt like she was being choked. And the old man would appear before her and be like, "Get the fuck out!" And she started freaking out. Her ex-husband, or estranged husband at the time, came back through and was like, "You know what? You're just being fucking paranoid because you're pregnant. You got all these fucking hormones." And so he kind of like a jackass stands in the middle of the room and is like, "You know what? There's anything fucking here? Come get me now. Come fucking attack me. Do what you need to do." And it was like, "See? Ain't nothing fucking come kill me, so you're fucking crazy." And then like storms out. And as soon as he leaves, she hears all this rattling and inside the closet, and she opens up the closet, and written in ink all over the closet wall was, "I'll fucking kill you, I'll fucking kill you, I'll fucking kill you." It got to the point to where she was so freaked out that she called the paranormal team in, and they did a house investigation, and they decided to go up into the attic. And when they go up into the attic, all the camera equipment just like fizzles out, all the lights shut off, and so the camera guy and the audio guy are standing next to each other, and you just hear the audio guy like scream and kind of like disappear. And so the camera guy's like, "Listen, I got this camera with a flash on it. I'm gonna kind of use it as a makeshift flashlight." And he's just snapping photos, snap, snap, snap. And like every time he would snap a photo, the flash would go off.
Right.
It would kind of give him that little, like 4-second window to be able to see something. And again, they showed this great evidence. The camera guy is like fucking up in the rafters with like a rope around his neck, just hanging with his eyes rolled up to the back of his head. And when the guy was taking the photos and it got the flash, he actually captured that photo.
Wow.
So now he's freaked the fuck out. They pulled the guy down from the noose or whatever, the rope tied around his throat.
I think it was like cable, like some kind of like maybe the cables or electrical wires or something like that. Yeah.
And so they get them all down. They're all freaked the fuck out. And then they all just like hightail it like pussies and get out of the house.
Like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. And the lead investigator later said, like, I felt really bad because I'm like, here's a single mom. She's got one in the oven and she's got a little kid there. And we just ran. Like, we're supposed to be adult men. And we just fucking ran out. And so they go back a second time. And that's when, like, you could actually hear, they're videotaping it, and you could hear somebody walking across the attic, like walking across the ceiling. And they actually, whoever went up there, you actually see something push the camera and push the guy out of the attic, and he falls down. So at that point, they all just got out of the fucking house. They're just like, "No, screw this, we're gone." And, the house was a rental at the time, so the lady didn't actually own the house. And so the house has had numerous tenants in and out. There's been some weird backstory. If you actually go to try to look up the history of it, you might find like a Wikipedia page where it says that there was an army general or a sergeant who lived in that house prior to her, 15 years earlier, and committed suicide in the house. But those are unconfirmed. But all the other tenants, up until past that point, have never confirmed any paranormal activity. They've done some investigations. Some paranormal teams have gone in. They haven't got anything. But if you look at the research on poltergeist, 9 times out of 10, poltergeist activity is always due to an increase of stress. Or like if you have a family who's going through divorce, if you have like teenagers who are going through like a rough puberty, they're getting picked on at school, or just like, they're just over emotional, that those are the worst case of poltergeist. So if you look at the Lutz family, George Lutz, those weren't his children. Those kids' dad had died like 2 years prior. And so now you have the stress of this family who is basically coming together and starting over, moving into this house. And I don't remember exactly. I think that the Fayos were having, some problems as well. And that negativity kind of feeds into that and actually gives those whatever's there the essence or the energy to haunt or, be evil or do those things. Then the next family that steps in, they report no paranormal activity, but it's just a husband and wife. I didn't really read that they were divorced, so, kudos to you for finding that. But for the most part, they didn't have a stressful life, so of course they're not going to see all the stuff that the Lutz family or whatever happened to the DeFeos. You look at this other house, the man in the attic, being a single mom, trying to go back to school, having one kid on the way, not having the financial support and worrying. That could have been the fuel to the fire, so to speak, and
right.
why that whatever's there decided to act out against her because it had enough energy. Because there's a lot that we don't know about the paranormal and all that. Like we think we do, we don't know how our emotions feed into that, and there could be something to that. So
yeah, that's been something that I've read a lot about. There's been a lot of studies about is if poltergeists are actually ghost activity, or if it's just an increased amount of what do you call it, like psychic activity in the troubled teens or troubled family members, and that's what happens is actually just them exhausting just a bunch of mental power or mental anguish, and that causes things to move and things to go flying. What gets me in in poltergeist activity is when you've got cases like in Unsolved Mysteries. I remember watching an episode where a woman would go buy groceries, and then when she'd come back home, she'd put the eggs away in the fridge, shut the fridge door, turn around, and then she'd hear the sound of eggs splatting. Right. She would hear the sound of eggs splatting on the wall beside her, and she said that she could look and watch eggs physically go through the door, like materialize through the door of the fridge, go flying past her, and blowing up on the walls and the cabinets and the counters beside her. And I always thought, that's so weird. I don't even know how you split it. If it's psychic ability or what have you, then that's one thing, but it could be ghosts. But again, no matter how you split it, how are you getting eggs to go through? That defies physics and everything else. How are you getting eggs to go through a damn door? So, well, I guess we can shift our focus off of ghosts for a little while and maybe move into something else a little bit more kind of atypical. We don't talk a lot about witches on this show, but I've got a pretty cool story, and we can throw it into the idea of a listener story if we want to, although it's more or less just a story that I kind of fell into, and out of respect for the family, I've agreed not to say their names. But what I can say is the people that told me the story are very, very honest, God-fearing, hardworking Texan people, and they have no reason to make up a story, no reason to lie. And before they told me the story, they didn't realize that I was really into this kind of stuff. It was more or less one of those deals where the guy approached me and says, "Hey, can I tell you something, Shawn?" I said, "Yeah, sure, go for it." And he goes, "I don't really care what you think of me after you tell me this story because I know it's true and I know it really happened." But he went on to tell me a story, and I'll kind of set the scene real quick for you. They live in a small Texas town, and across the street from their house is a pretty nice park, a really nice city park. And it's not uncommon for this couple to go walking around the park at night, as the sun goes down and the evening kind of dies out. They might make a couple laps around the park. So one night they were walking, and they were about halfway around the park. And out of nowhere, I'm going to call him Jack. Jack looks up in a tree. Just
Jack and Jill?
We'll call him Jack and Jill. They're walking around the park, and Jack just happens to look up in this tree, and he says, "Shawn, I swear, in this tree was an owl. But the owl had a woman's face." He said it had a normal owl body, but it had an old, wrinkly woman's face, like a witch. He said it was a gray all over. The face, the feathers and everything were gray. But he's like, "I swear on everything, it had an old woman's face." And I looked at it, and as soon as I saw it and realized what it was, I turned my head real quick. I told Jill, "Don't look at it. Don't look at it. Just keep walking." And they finished their walk, got home, and then didn't think too much about it, really. They just thought that it was really interesting, the fact that they had saw that. And he, again, like he said, I looked at it. I knew instantly that it wasn't holy and it wasn't godly, and I should never look at it or go looking for it ever again. So that, of course, immediately caught my interest. And so as soon as I got home, I looked up, and they live in a part of Texas that's kind of close. It's not close to Mexico, but it's kind of that southern area where you've got a lot of Mexican culture, Hispanic culture, and folklore that kind of gets tangled into the everyday norm. And so I looked this up, and I just hit Google and typed in witch owl or owl witch, and I came up with the result of what the I don't know if it's PC to call Mexican things Mexican or Hispanic, so I'm just going to say Mexican. So forgive me, please, if that's rude. But how about Hispanic? In Hispanic folklore, there's what you know as the La Lechuza, which La Lechuza means the witch bird. And to make a long story kind of short, basically, there's a legend of this bird witch, and she's considered to be a shapeshifter. And they say that she can appear at any time, day or night, mostly in the evening, because a lot of times they assume anything that's, a demon or a witch prefers to be out at night. She can appear anytime, and it seems to be particularly widespread in the Zavala County. Now, I don't think this was in Zavala County, but we're just going to kind of read off of the Demon Hunter Compendium website. She enjoys attacking...
Whoa. The what was that?
The Demon Hunter Compendium blogspot.
That sounds like a place we should be employed.
Or at least a partnership. Okay, so it says that... man, you threw me off, you son of a gun. Okay, so La Lechuza particularly enjoys attacking people who have had a little bit too much to drink, one too many beers. Many people believe in her existence, while others claim to have actually seen the creature, i.e. Jack and Jill. They saw this bird creature sitting in this tree across from a house. The legends seem to kind of vary from source to source. In some instances, she's a vengeful spirit. In others, she's a woman that has sold her soul to the devil in order to gain supernatural powers. Every night, she is said to transform into a 5 to 6 foot tall bird, commonly an owl, with the face of a beautiful or wizened old woman with enormous wings. Now, I'll be the first to say that when Jack told me the story, he said it was bigger than like a normal like barn owl, but he by no means said it wasn't any 5 foot tall or 6 foot tall owl. So I'm just going to assume it's 2 foot tall owl maybe. Now, this also kind of resembles the harpies from Greek mythology in many ways, but it says that she also bears a lot of traits of the siren or the banshee. La Lechuza uses sound that bears a supernatural compulsion to lure her prey away from friends and family or, populated areas, and sometimes she can mimic the sound of a crying baby to get people to basically separate and go off on their own. It says, once she lures her prey, La Lechuza perches herself in a hidden area and will then commence making these strange whistling or crying noises to lure people away. She can then swoop down, grab them through her talons, and carry them away. It's said that she is strong enough to carry away small animals and children and even large men. Once she has the prey in her sight, she will swoop down on the confused and frightened individual, carry them to her lair where she may devour them at her leisure, similar to the banshees of Irish folklore and Scottish legend. To hear the cry of the witch bird is an omen that someone in the household of the one who heard the cry is about to die. Also, it is said that La Lechuza, and this gets back to my story, La Lechuza is said to perch herself outside of the house of a man who may be running around on his wife. So basically, if you're being unfaithful to your female spouse, it is said that she will perch outside the house and basically just kind of hunt you down. So I did talk to Jack, and he did mention something about there being the potential for the person who lived in the house that the bird was perched outside of. There were rumors that he was running around on his wife. So I thought that just kind of, everything kind of falls into place, really. You've got the witch bird who doesn't like it whenever you're cheating on your wife, and she's just perched right outside the house. So, Jack.
Gentlemen, you heard it here first. Don't hit it and quit it, or La Lechuza will come and
La
get you.
Lechuza. So it said that she is immortal. However, you could kill La Lechuza if you would try to with silver bullets.
I got a story about that.
Now, is that about... Go ahead and throw it at me, because if it's different from what I was going to say, then I'll say it. But yeah, go ahead and tell me your part of this.
So, when you first... because you actually told me this story, like a year ago?
Man, it's been a couple years ago that we were down there.
And so it was kind of ironic, like, as soon as you told me that story, not even like a week later, this other podcast that I listened to, Expanded Perspective, so shout out to the Bruds in Texas. They were doing a podcast on like Texas legends, and they were talking about, is it La Lechuza?
La Lechuza. Uh-huh.
Okay. And so one of the stories that they were telling was a group of farmers who found one on their land, like this giant, nasty, fucking old lady-looking bird owl, when it was up in the trees. And being good old Texan farmers, they got out the shotguns and blew that here to, high water. And they were like, we got it. And a day or two later, they were roaming the farmstead, because some of those ranches are like 400 or 500 acres or whatever it is. And they found like a blood trail, and they followed it, and they found the body of an old haggard woman, riddled with shotgun wounds, similar to what the cowboys or the farmers said that they shot this witch bird. They said it was very, very scary, very ironic. So they just buried the body and freaked out and left.
Yeah, like you said, it's often part of the folklore that if you were to shoot the bird, either instead of the bird falling out of the tree, it'd be the body of the old woman, the old hag, or in some instances you would shoot the bird, and the next morning you'd come across the body of an old woman with the same bullet pattern. So other legends of the witch bird beg to differ. According to these tidbits of folklore, La Lechuza can be killed or warded off. Like most creatures that serve the darkness, La Lechuza hates salt, which is renowned for its purity. An unbroken line or circle of salt should ward her off, either table salt or sea salt, mind you. It has to be free of any impurities like iodide. I don't know if you can use pink Himalayan sea salt or not, so that's jury's still out on that for any organic fans.
So why do you say that?
Oh, just pink Himalayan sea salt's kind of all the rage right now. So,
what does it have iodine in it?
No, I don't know. It's just pink.
I think it's because of its impurities, like the
I'm gonna argue with you. I think if you find a salt that's pink, it's probably in a pure form because it hasn't been bleached out.
Well, okay, but I think it's the iron oxide that's in there that's causing it to be pink.
Well, we can research that later for it.
Listen. This is what we do. Okay, I want to run this by you real quick.
Okay.
So the one way to get the attention of this owl bitch is be drinking, right?
Okay.
What's one thing that both of us do really well?
I could make a list of things I do well.
Okay, well, one of them is we drink beer pretty well.
I mean, we're not terrible at it.
Well, yeah. So I think what we should do is we should go down to Texas. We should crack open some really good, let's just get a 24-pack of variety, you know what I'm saying? And we'll go get some regular sea salt. We'll get some pink Himalayan sea salt. We'll be walking around drunk as skunks. And we'll just test it out on this bitch. And if, push comes to shove, I'm sure Jack and Jill have a shotgun we can borrow. We'll blow the bitch out of a tree and boops.
See, I don't think we're going to see her. And the reason why I say that is you have the mouth of a immature sailor, and it says here that besides saying Hail Mary backwards in Spanish to make her flee, you can also get her to leave by cursing at the creature in Spanish. So you have,
but I don't know Spanish.
You have a salty sea tongue, so I doubt she'd even come anywhere near us. She'd probably hear us when we hit Oklahoma on the highway. She would hear your terrible potty mouth and just flee. So, and if that,
I resent all that you just
you resemble everything I just said.
I have the fucking mouth of a gentleman.
Yeah, that's arguable. Other ways to get rid of her would be praying, tying 7 knots into a piece of rope, or hiring a good witch. Yeah, and finally blasting the creature with a shotgun while she has taken the form of a bird. So you may not be able to kill her while she's in human form, but when she turns into the bird, which would explain why, when you shoot her as a bird, that kills her, and she comes back in the form of an old hag. So
yeah,
there you go. So now a little bonus story too, since they are kind of down there with a lot of Hispanic folklore and mythos going on. Jack also told me a really cool story.
They found it was chupacabra. They found a chupacabra.
No, no, it wasn't a chupacabra. Okay, so the egg story. There was a guy that Jack had known. I'm not sure if the husband in this story was Hispanic or not. The wife it says here the story that the wife was Hispanic. So basically, a guy he was working with, that Jack was working with, was very ill. Out of nowhere, headaches, queasy stomach, allergies, stuff like that. Had no idea what was causing him to be sick. But basically it says that okay, yeah, so he was ill and he couldn't figure out what was causing it. He couldn't get better. But one day when he was at home, he found a bell jar under his bed. So when he opened up the bell jar, basically it contained a broken egg, some bird feathers. It smelled of urine, which he believed was urine because of this yellowish liquid that was in the bottom of it. And it also contained the picture of the man with the head burnt off. It says that the man had been fighting with his wife recently, and they were not able to really kind of reconcile. And so when he approached his wife about, what the hell is this jar under the bed? What's going on? She basically said that she was so upset with him that she had placed a curse on him. And once he mended the relationship with his wife, she got rid of the bell jar and everything was fine.
Okay, so...
Go ahead.
Okay. Speaking of like weird curses and things like that, so Frankie's mom used to like practice like Wiccan spells and shit like that, and she would do fortune telling, like how like some witches will do like the like tea leaf things, where they like you dump the tea out and whatever pattern the tea leaves make, like you can tell your fortune or whatever. She would do it by pissing in a cauldron and dumping fingernails and toenail clippings in there. Ugh. And then boiling out the piss, and then whatever patterns the fingernails would leave, like you could like make a reading off of that. That's just a little witch story. That's like a bonus witch story on top of your witch story.
Witch on witch on witch.
Witch on witch on witch on witch.
Okay, so pink Himalayan sea salt, it says here it contains 84 minerals and trace elements just like Mother Earth intended. It is a pure form of salt that has been mined from salt caves that were formed 250 million years ago as the ocean salt settled in certain geological pockets around the Earth.
Like a pumpkin spice latte, this sounds like the white girl of sea salt.
It sounds like it's really good.
I have a bottle.
You drink pumpkin beer all the time. I was gonna say you drink pumpkin beer all the time, you jackwagon. So.
Yep, and I got a bottle of pink Himalayan sea salt in my cupboard right now.
I knew you did. So, okay, guys, we've nailed some ghosts. We've talked about witches as well. So why not talk about werewolves, right? I mean, nobody shies away from a good werewolf story unless it's Twilight. And let's get something straight right here. I don't feel
we don't condone sparkling vampires and Taylor
Lautner.
Laughlin. Yeah, whatever his name is, werewolves. We don't do it.
Yeah, see, the thing is, like, I'm okay with the sparkly werewolves. Sparkly vampires. What I'm not okay with is I'm getting really tired of these. Here, I'm going to push my nerd glasses up real quick. I'm getting tired of these quadrupedal werewolves. In my own opinion, I feel like werewolves should be bipedal wolfmen. The old wolf man, he was a werewolf and he walked on hind legs and he was a man wolf or a wolf man. And I feel like that's just a cheap way to get out of like a good storytelling or good special effects. It's just to make your werewolf like giant, like dire wolves, like on what's that show? I'm not trying to be pretentious. I can't think of it. Game of Thrones. And I realize that dire wolves aren't supposed to be werewolves, but they're just wolves. They're just basic wolves, and that's why they're on 4 feet, like a regular wolf. So let's get one thing straight, guys. Werewolves are bipedal creatures, and if they're quadrupedal, then they're just big wolves, big doggies.
And werewolves, if you're on 4 legs, guess what?
You suck.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So, you got a werewolf story. You want to go first, or should I?
This is Mary Ellen Guiley. Okay, that's her name. She wrote a book like American Monsters or American Werewolves or whatever it was, and she's got all these different like dogmen stories.
Oh yeah.
She doesn't call them werewolves. She calls them dogmen.
Well, and that's okay.
And I don't remember which state it was, but this guy reported that he was driving home late one night, and like this like fucking fog took over, and it was like getting really heavy, and he like basically got turned around like, oh shit, I don't know where I'm driving, I don't know what I'm doing, like I'm starting to freak out, but I'm just gonna drive really slow and keep going through the fog. And then as the fog lifted, he found himself in front of like this, those silver bullet trailers that they used to have in the 50s.
Like Coors Light silver bullet, or
like the,
yeah. Like the Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Mobile homes that were like the Big Ten, and they were like, it looked like blimps.
Yeah, the Streamline. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Streamline trailers.
Streamline.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
So he just kind of like, the fog lifts and the car stops and he's like, he's in front of this like fucking Streamline Silver Bullet trailer and he can see like someone's in there, but it was kind of oddly shaped and it was like moving around. And so he's just like, oh shit, like what do I do? And he's like, I mean, I guess like, fuck, I mean, I guess I should like get out and be like, hey, do you have any idea where the fuck I'm at? Because I'm lost, man. I don't mean to bother you or anything. So he opens up the car door and he starts walking toward the trailer and the fucking trailer door opens and out walks a giant bipedal wolfman in jeans and a wife beater with a cigarette and like, Cooler's Light bottle in his other hand.
Silver bullet.
He just takes a look, like just kind of looks up and down this dude, like, shaking outside of his car and he's like, hey, you fucking get off my property right now. I'm going to fucking eat you in half, you son of a bitch. Takes a swig of his beer, smokes his cigarette and takes his wolfman ass back inside and shuts the door. And the guy's like, well, the fog was gone, so I just fucking got in my car, put it in reverse, and fucking hightailed it out of there. You know what I'm saying?
Man, isn't fog basically nature's way of saying, get the hell out of here?
Yeah, like, don't go this way.
Yeah, it's like the world's best caution sign. Oh, man, it's foggy. We better just turn around and go back wherever we're supposed to be going.
But I want to go find that werewolf, and I just want to meet him because like he sounds like we could party.
It sounds like to me like he'd eat your face or cut it off and wear it to his next birthday party he goes to.
I would give him a pumpkin beer and win his heart over.
If he drinks a silver bullet, I think he'd probably make fun. He'd probably kill you just on principle of drinking pumpkin beer. Okay, so
I'd be like, put that in your pipe and smoke it.
He'd probably put you in his pipe and smoke it. So coincidentally, I've got a really cool story that I actually saw on Paranormal Witness as well. Now, I did some investigative work and found out that your story was episode 1 of season 2 of Paranormal Witness.
Oh, I was close.
You were very close, yeah, so kudos to you. And an ironic twist. Oh, no, you know what? Hey, my story's from the same season. Mine came from episode 10 of season 2.
Guys, we've watched that show religiously, and the further the seasons go, the worse they get. So just pretty much stop after season 2. Don't bother with the further.
Right, watch the Wolfman story, and then just stop. So in episode 10 of season 2 of Paranormal Witness, they had a really awesome werewolf story, and it's probably, honestly, like outside of the story you told about the man in the attic, this is the one story that I've absolutely fallen in love with. And I don't know what year. I want to say it was the 80s, so shame on me for not finding out specifically. I did a lot of outside research on this story, outside of just that TV show, and I think it says like maybe 1982 this takes place, but it's in the town of London, Ohio, and basically it takes place in a decently populated area out in the woods in Ohio, and it's about a family, a husband named Keith and a wife named Diane and their 4-year-old daughter. They move into this cabin in the woods in Ohio, and they start making a home for themselves, and the only problem they really have is that living out in the country, the 3 of them, the mom is a stay-at-home mom, and the husband is going to school he's doing night school, and then he works during the day, so basically he kind of leaves about, I'm imagining 6 o'clock in the morning, doesn't get home till probably like 10 or 11, so he's working during the day and going to school at night, trying to better himself. And one night, when Diane is by herself with just her and her daughter, she notices that she begins to hear footsteps outside, like scampering noises, like a dog or a deer or something in the yard. Looking outside, she doesn't really see what's going on. She doesn't see anything out there. She just keeps hearing the noises. She's a bit spooked, doesn't feel right with her, but she kind of just ignores it. She's closing the blinds that evening, and she looks outside, and as she's closing one of the last sets of blinds, she notices out behind some of the trees what looks like eyeballs staring back at her. And she says it's pretty much the way like cat or dog eyes look at you when the light hits them in the dark. They're kind of glowing like almost like an amber color. And so this scares the shit out of her. She shuts up all the doors, all the windows, all the blinds, from one room to the next, to the next, to the next. And then she grabs a flashlight. The husband gets home, kind of does some investigating, can't seem to find out what she's talking about, and basically says, honey, you probably just saw like a wild dog, a coyote, or something like that out in the yard, so just, quit overreacting. So a couple weeks go by, and she's doing the dishes in the kitchen. Her daughter's in the house just doing, God knows what. And she looks out through the window above the sink and happens to see the eyes again. And she notes that they're really close to the window, like probably a few feet away from the house. And she says she distinctly remembers them being higher than just a dog or a deer or whatever. They're almost like human height for a man. And so she shuts the blinds real quick, runs into the next room, and as she's looking out those windows, this thing is standing outside of that window. And so she slams the blinds closed, runs to the front door, and it's the front door looking at her. So she shuts the blinds in the living room, and basically every room she went to, this thing was following her, and every time she looked out the window, it was looking back in at her. So she gets really freaking freaked out. She calls the police, she grabs her daughter, and when the police get there, the husband get there, she's terrified, saying basically there's a man or a monster outside the house, but as much as they do, they can't find anything. They search high and low in the yard, in the woods. There's no footprints, there's no nothing. She just can't basically prove what she had saw. So they're kind of thinking she's kooky, and maybe she's just overreacting because of, just being home at night. She's alone, she's scared, she's lonely, she misses her husband, so maybe she's trying to get some extra attention. Then this is kind of where the story gets kind of cool, in my opinion. About 4 or 5 months later, the first big snow hits since they've lived there, and Keith decides, I'm off work today. I'm going to get up way early, zip into town while the family's asleep, and get some donuts for everybody. I think everybody would love some donuts for breakfast. So he gets dressed and, lackadaisically walks through the house, gets his shoes and his boots and his jacket, goes outside. And, he's rubbing his eyes, all tired, and gets into the car, starts the car, and he's waiting for it to warm up. And he, like everybody else, glances in the rearview mirror before he backs up. And to his astonishment, he sees a hulking outline of a figure and 2 glowing amber-colored eyes. So like any of the rest of us, he slams it into park real quick, kicks open the door, turns around, and this thing is gone. But what he said scared the piss out of him was there are larger than dog-sized tracks in the yard. They don't look like a dog, they don't look like a man, but they're going through the snow. About 10 feet from the house, the tracks disappear, and on the awning of the porch, there are the same footprints that go up the roof. And then later on, when he goes around to the back of the house, they traipse down the backside of the roof, and they reappear about 20 feet away from the house in the yard. So basically, this thing turned around, jumped on top of the roof, ran across the roof, jumped out in the yard, and disappeared out into the woods. He said, obviously, it wasn't human because it was so powerful, and how far it jumped, and how far it got away, and how quick, too. So, like any other good old boy, he calls his friend. And his friend is a well-known hunter and tracker and, man's man of the woods. So Keith and his buddy Dennis decide to go tracking these tracks into the woods and find out just where the hell it went. So they said that they tracked these for several miles, and they end up being outside and clear until the sun comes up. Right after the sun comes up, they find a clearing in the woods, and they find a small cabin in this clearing. So they're thinking, okay, by God, we're going to go mess this thing up and figure out what the hell it was. So they run up to the cabin, start banging on the door, banging on the window, screaming, hooting, and hollering, and then realized, oh shit, we've just snuck up on this cabin. We're 2 guys with guns banging and carrying on. We probably look like psychopaths. Let's, maybe we should turn around and go back home. So they call Keith's dad, and Keith's dad comes and picks them up and takes them back to the house because they don't feel like walking. And they mention to the dad what's going on, and he's like, well, you know what? There's an old man that lives in that cabin named George, and he works in town at the local tire shop. So Keith's friend Dennis grabs the tire and cuts a hole in the side of it under the guise of having a leak, and they both go into town to this tire shop to get some investigative work done and basically see if they can find out whoever the hell it was and see if George works in this tire shop. So they show up, talk to the owner, and say, yeah, somebody sliced this tire. Can you patch it up for me? And he's like, yeah, sure, we'll give it to our guy who patches the tires. He's back in the shop. So they walk around to the backside of the tire repair store, and they notice that the garage is kind of dark. Not abnormally dark, just kind of dingy. And so they holler, the owner hollers at George, and a man kind of clears out of the shadows. And the owner takes the tire back to the old man. The old man fixes it. And Keith notices something strange about George. Whenever the tire was finally ready, And George kind of approaches him with the tire. He's got the same exact colored eyes as the creature he saw in the rearview mirror and the wife reported seeing outside. So this kind of scares the piss out of Keith. And then they also notice, I don't know if this was just for fun in the TV show, but there were some strange, like almost like Indian hieroglyphs painted in chalk on the side of the tire whenever they get it back from George. And of course, he looks back up and George looks at him one more time and then kind of disappears back into the shadows. So they're really freaked the hell out. About 3 or 4 months go by and Dennis calls Keith and said that they're going to go for a ride. They drove out to the cabin and they met up with Dennis's friend who was like a sheriff, I think, a sheriff deputy. And the deputy says, man, basically old man George died a while back, and so we need to go inside and investigate the cabin. And when we went inside and investigated, you're not going to believe what we found. So they go inside this dead man's cabin and find out that it's pretty well desolate. There might be like 1 or 2 like flannel shirts. They note that there was a big mason jar full of like silver dollars on one of the counters. But otherwise, there's no food. There's not really much of a... it doesn't look like somebody has lived there too comfortably. It's just kind of like the bare minimum. But they said what was really strange is the deputy says, come back here and look at this. And there's a door in the back of the cabin, and they open this big metal door, and it smells like wet dogs. And as they shine the flashlights around in this little room hidden behind the metal door, they find out that the walls have been covered in like steel plating that have been riveted together. There were chains attached to the walls and the floor, so basically to restrain 2 arms, 2 legs, and the walls were covered in scratches, and everybody's thinking basically that old man George was the werewolf. And they have no way to prove it because George was not known to have any family in the area, and supposedly, like every good spooky campfire tale, he was buried in an unmarked grave, and his cabin was later demolished. So let's go through the checklist. Haunted houses.
Check.
Creepy old men in attics.
Check.
Bird witches.
Check.
Werewolves aplenty.
Check, check, and check.
So, what's a good Halloween show without a little bit of UFO and alien talk? I know that those are things that, I mean, I've always been intrigued by and terrified by. So I say we do a little talking about some UFOs. And I think what we'll do, man, because I really like your little story you told, and it's kind of a quick anecdote. Let me go over the story I've got here of the 1968 Bluff Ledge alien abduction, and then you can follow up with yours, because yours is actually pretty intriguing, I think. I really like that. So basically... in 1968, there was a reported alien abduction from a summer camp. And I really dig this story because, A, it's in 1968, so it's kind of like when UFO abductions really were kind of beginning to develop and first kind of being heard widespread. I want to say this was shortly after the Betty and Barney Hill abductions, but it's another pretty celebrated tale. And basically, it was supposedly a valid account of an alien abduction. They kind of did a lot of investigations later on and found out that through interviews with local people who also saw strange lights in the sky, that there's a pretty good chance this is a true story. But basically, a valid account of alien abduction of 2 teenage counselors comes from us from the state of Vermont. 4 UFOs would appear in daylight over the lake of Buff Ledge Camp, making baffling maneuvers with lightness of a falling leaf. So basically they're saying these things could float back and forth, flip around, zippity-doo-dah, whatever. Basically defying all logic, for normal manned aircraft, quote unquote. So on August 7th of 1968, the strange encounter begins with a 16-year-old named Michael, who was a maintenance man for the camp, or maintenance teen, he's 16, and then 19-year-old Janet. Damn it, Janet.
I love you.
So the camp was located a little bit north of Burlington on Lake Champlain, and the 2 were taking a break on the boat dock. So that just sets you up right there for a classic horror movie.
Yeah, because we also, Lake Champlain, we have a Champ, the Loch Ness Monster of America.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That's why Lake Champlain sounds familiar. Okay, cool. So, so first off, It says it's a warm afternoon. The camp was kind of sparsely inhabited because I think the swim team was out that day for a swim meet. So it's just kind of 16-year-old Michael and the crush of his life, Janet, and they're imagining them talking on a boat dock, and he's just doing his best James Dean impression, trying to make her laugh, and she's maybe humoring him or thinking, wow, this young kid's my only option, so I might as well go for it. Okay, cool. So the kids from the swim team are in Burlington for a swim meet. So it's basically just kind of, a couple counselors, a couple maintenance men. Michael and Janet are on the dock enjoying the view of the setting sun when suddenly a bright light appears. This light was what they thought originally was Venus. They thought maybe it's just Venus appearing in the night sky. And they noticed what was strange is Venus was getting brighter and lower in the night sky. So as this object they thought was Venus draws closer, the shape became more and more clear that it was a saucer. Suddenly, Michael remarks, wow, Venus is falling out of the sky. But he knew better than that, of course, like the rest of us would know. The lone light now dropped a little bit lower, and then 3 smaller lights fall out of it, and they immediately soar over the lake. The largest object soon disappears from sight, and it was obvious that the objects that were coming out of it were being intelligently controlled. The UFOs seemed to perform a lot of strange, mesmerizing movements they couldn't really identify, as far as being like, a human controlled ships. They were doing zigzags, loops. They would drop just like a leaf and then take back control and fly straight lines, that kind of thing. The three UFOs moved closer to the 2 friends. The UFOs formed a triangle formation, and then 2 of them pulled away, leaving just 1 single UFO out in front of the 2 on the boat dock. Later, Michael will recall hearing something that sounded like 1,000 tuning forks going off at once as the 2 objects had pulled back to fly away. The last UFO then passed right over them, shot downward, and briefly disappeared. Suddenly, it would reappear tilted onto one side, and then it dropped straight into the lake. After a short time, it came out of the lake and then moved directly towards Michael and Janet. The UFO was so close that they actually said they could see 2 beings standing and looking at them through a transparent window on the side of the object. And they described the beings as your classic, aliens. The beings were childlike in size. According to Michael, their necks were elongated. They had big heads for their body size. They had no hair. They had large eyes wrapped around the side of their head. And he thought that it was he thought he could hear mental contact from them, maybe talking to him telepathically. He watched the aliens for a short while, and then he slapped his knee for no reason apparent to him. He said it was odd, though, that one of the aliens did the same thing. Looking at Michael, slapped his own knee. The UFO at this point is now directly above their head, and it shoots a beam down on the 2, just like your typical abductions. Michael says he remembers grabbing Janet's shoulder and pulling her back, so they both landed on their backs on the ground, so that on the boat dock, I should say. So he was trying to pull them out of the light so they wouldn't be taken. He screams up, "We don't want to go, we don't want to go." The next thing he knows, he's sitting on the boat dock staring at the object next to Janet, which is now farther away from them. Janet seemed to be sitting there in a trance, and it was now totally dark outside, so of course your classic missing time. Soon they heard members of the swim team returning as they made their way back to the camp, and the UFO moved a little higher out of the sky, flashed its lights a couple times, almost in a pattern to communicate with something else, and then disappears. Michael wondered, how long have we been out here? Where were we? What the hell's going on? Nothing would be said about what happened that late afternoon. When the summer camp ended, the 2 went their separate ways. Michael rarely thought about the experience for the next 5 years, but as some time went by, he began to have disturbing dreams. 10 years after Michael's experience, he decided to contact the Center for UFO Studies. He was referred to an investigator named Walter Webb. After becoming familiar with the details of the case, Webb suggested regressive hypnosis to Michael to relieve some of his nightmares and to hopefully find out where they were coming from. So the sessions brought back the events of that late afternoon at Bluff Ledge. It says now he recalled being lifted by a beam onto a waiting UFO and then going into a larger UFO. He remembers looking over and seeing Janet laying on an examination table. He describes the beings shining lights into her eyes, taking skin samples, taking fluids from her body. And he said the beings all looked alike. All of them looked exactly the same. They had the large eyes, the mouth with no lips, just slits, The ears were missing, 2 small openings for a nose, and again, giant, large, oval-shaped almond eyes that wrap from the front of their face almost to the side of their heads. He says he remembers their bodies feeling clammy and cold, almost damp, and he recalls that the aliens told him they want life on our planet to be like theirs, without any violence. So, a little epilogue to this story. It says that Janet is now 29 years old, and she had also been regressed. Her memories would also only strengthen the case of the abduction. She recalls the coldness of the table that she laid on. Something had pulled her hair behind her. Something had pinched her neck. And there was no disharmony in Michael and Janet's statements. Basically, what they were saying was the same exact thing. So, Dr. Webb also conducted an investigation outside the boundaries of regressive hypnosis. He said he was able to find other members of Buff Ledge that had also witnessed strange lights over Lake Champlain on the same night as Michael and Janet's abduction. 2 other members of the camp also claimed to have been abducted after seeing strange lights, also earlier in the summer. Their names were not released, and the events at Buff Ledge Camp are certainly proof of alien abduction, or so this article says. So, give me just a minute here and see if I can get a hold of old Preston, because I just lost him here.
Are you there?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We're talking about alien abduction, and all of a sudden we lose our Skype call.
I know, it just, like, my computer was just, like, all of a sudden, like, froze up, and then I'm like, Shawn, and then
That's weird. So basically, it just says here that she remembers the coldness of the table, something pulling her hair, pinching her neck, and then basically there were no dissimilar events in their story, so basically they kind of had the same story. It also says here that Webb also conducted an investigation outside the boundaries of regression and hypnosis. He was able to find other members of the Buff Ledge camp area that had witnessed strange lights over Lake Champlain the same night as Michael and Janet's abduction. The other members of the camp also claimed to have been abducted after seeing strange lights in the sky, but earlier in the summer, not the same night. And unfortunately, the names were not released in this article, but it does say that supposedly this is proof of alien abduction, so kind of some scary, scary stuff there. Okay, so while we still have time, why don't you go ahead and tell me your little alien story here, man? And remember, keep his name out if you want. That's fine.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and keep his name out. But basically, upon joining the lodge, after I got my second degree, one of the brothers that is really good friends with Jason now. After my second degree, went to the Oasis Lounge, which is the Shriner Bar, and he owns and operates a mortuary here in town. And at one point in time in his early career, he what's the town or the area of New Mexico, like right out part of Area 51 where they detonated the atomic bomb, Alamogordo. I never say it right, so...
Well, Area 51 is in Nevada.
Where was
atomic bomb? Alamogordo, New Mexico.
Yeah. Because part of that's actually... that's part of Area 51 as well. Like, that big stretch, like, all that area is all zoned off.
It just says the Trinity bomb site in central New Mexico, so just call it that.
So basically, he had a body come in, and he, has only so many days where he actually has to, do the embalming fluids and get it ready for burial. And he said that he was unable to accurately describe what he saw, like, unless you were there, like, no words that he could use to describe would accurately describe the body. Like, irradiated is not even close. Like, it was just had a really weird look to it. It didn't look natural. It looked like something was very off with this body. So he starts the embalming process. We're getting ready to start the embalming process, and these typical, not so much Men in Black, because when we hear reports of Men in Black, they're kind of more robotic in tone, but these government employees, so to speak, in black show up with a order saying that they needed the body They basically took the body out of the mortuary, performed what they called test on it, and then dumped it back off several days later. And like, yeah, you're gonna bomb it now. And he was like, but it didn't look the same. Like it was kind of. He was like, something was off still, but they dumped the body back, and he, did the embalming, and they buried it with the family a couple days later. And he was like, so that, he's like, don't think for 1 second that there's not something going on in Area 51. He's like, because that whole experience right there basically just set me off to thinking, yeah, the government's got something weird going on. Because, the body didn't look natural. Why would you want it? Like, why would you want to come and pick it back up and perform your own test and then drop it back off and it doesn't look the same? He was like, that whole scenario, he was like, it was just weird as shit. So, now I'd like to remind people that when you become a Mason, you do take an obligation, and so it's kind of like when you're talking to another brother. You don't tail. You don't.
Yeah, you don't bullshit.
You don't
each other,
bullshit.
right?
So this is a very serious thing. So coming from another brother to a brother, I would say that this is a pretty authentic story right here, and I believe in 100%.
Gosh, that's pretty crazy, man.
Yeah.
I mean, makes you wonder what the hell they wanted to do with it, or what caused it too. Was it some guy out there working on something and shit went south, and they had to kind of cover some tracks? Or That's bizarre. So does he still run the same kind of company here in Wichita?
Yeah, he has a mortuary here in Wichita,
cool.
and he does the embalming and does the services and everything. So I'm going to see if I can get some good stories.
Okay, guys, so speaking of personal stories, we've got a good one. We've got a listener story. We're pretty thrilled to have this. He actually did a recording and tells a story firsthand. So we're going to play that for you, so stick around for that, and we will be back on here in just a second. So,
what's up, everyone? This is David, Jerry V on Xbox One. Just wanted to share with you a quick story I had. Happened to me last week as I got off work early. My mom and dad have been vacationing in Tennessee for about a month or so. So I've been taking care of their house, collecting the mail, this and that. And I got off work early, and I stopped by their house, collected the mail, and as soon as I opened the front door, I felt a heaviness that was pretty unusual, and I was hesitant to actually continue into the house, but I decided, okay, I'll shrug it off, no big deal. As I approached the kitchen, I could tell that there was mail all over the floor, and I hurried up and entered into the kitchen, and I saw envelopes and all this mail scattered all over the floor, on other countertops, really haphazardly thrown everywhere. So I instantly think, well, who's been in the house? And as I'm thinking about that, I'm collecting all the mail, organizing it, putting it back up on the counter, and I go into another room for just a second and doing this and that, and I hear footsteps upstairs. I stopped in my tracks. I instantly was ready to go, wondering who's upstairs. Nobody should be in this house but me. So I run upstairs real quick, start kind of checking things out. Everything looks normal. No doors are open. No footsteps. They had stopped. So I kind of casually go back downstairs. And as soon as I hit the bottom of the stairs, I noticed that there was an envelope laying on the floor that I had just stacked up. Now I'm kind of starting to get freaked out. Like, what's really going on here? So I put the envelope back up, go back into the other room, and I hear the footsteps again. And now I'm almost angry at this point. I'm kind of like, who's in this house? So I charge right upstairs. No footsteps. Nothing out of the ordinary like it was just a second ago. And at this point, I'm kind of done with the whole thing. So I charge out of the upstairs and grab my keys, and I'm out the door because I don't want to know what that was at this point if I didn't see anybody. A little backstory to it. My grandma had passed away quite a few years ago, and we had lights and things like that kind of go on and off. Nothing real crazy. Shortly after we moved from Florida to this house in Kansas, I lived upstairs, and I'd always feel a presence upstairs in the hallway. If I'd get up late at night, use the restroom, I always felt as if I was walking down the hallway, something was right behind me. So I'd always have to turn and face the doorway as I got to my room, expecting something to be there. And it never was. But I attribute that to being my grandma. I hope it is. Scared the heck out of me. But I let my mom know what was kind of going on when I called her about that. And she said, oh yeah, Mom's been real active, turning on the porch light, turning it off once I've turned it on, get up in the middle of the night, this or that's been changed, like it was no big deal. So I'm assuming that it was my grandma, but just kind of a quick little spooky story that I encountered last week. Thank you guys for listening, and support Pixelated Paranormal. Great guys.
There you have it.
What do you think, man? That's a good one. First of all, I really appreciate the fact that David, you took the time to record that for us, because it's one thing for us to read a listener story. We can add some production value to it and everything, but it's a whole nother bag of worms whenever you have somebody read it themselves, and I really enjoy that because we can hear the sincerity in a person's voice when they're telling a story, and it's nice to hear the emotion and just kind of the storyteller themselves. So I really appreciate that. But what do you think, Preston? That sounds like it's a pretty freaky story.
It is, and I would like to myself assume that it probably is his grandma reaching out to him. Something simple like that. Like just knocking the mail over. Like, it's not trying to be too frightening, but just a little heads up, like, hey, I'm checking in on you guys, or hey, here I am. Just to let you know that they're there. So I think that on the spooky side of things, that's a softer spooky side. So that probably is something I wouldn't worry about, and it's probably just grandma giving them a nod, like, hey, here I am.
Right, but let me flip it over on you here for a second. Do you ever wonder, like, if it's a familiar, friendly spirit, do you think it would play so much with him as far as, like, scattering the mail around? He collects it all, he goes upstairs because he hears footsteps, comes back downstairs, and the mail's on the floor again, and then again footsteps and noises upstairs. I mean, like, if it's a friendly spirit, do you think it would be playing that many games with him, or do you think it could be something more?
Define, like, do we... So as far as the playing game things go, I wonder if it's just for the simple fact that it's trying to communicate, and it's trying all these other things, but it's not getting their attention. So then it's just like, listen, motherfuckers, here I am. And it's like, it's taking it to the extreme without being very scary to say, like, yes, here I am.
Yeah, not just relying on maybe one form of communication to make the presence known. Right. Okay, I'm catching what you're throwing there.
And,
so,
the times that he's been in that house, or, the example of the mom, there are several paranormal experiences that I've had where I've gotten the different vibes, where I'm like, holy shit, like, this actually feels freaky, because, like, I feel like, I can feel the bad vibes, and mom's picking up that, it's probably, grandma, and so, I think it's good. It's okay.
Yeah. Nothing to be too worried about yet. So cool. Good deal. Well, again, David, thanks, man, for sharing that. We really appreciate that. It's a great story, and maybe we can do some follow-ups and let us know if anything else develops out of that, man. Who knows? Maybe more stories are to come from him. So awesome. Well, guys, I think that's going to kind of conclude our Halloween show. Thanks a lot for humoring us, and thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you had a good time listening to us talk about many different things. And as always, thanks for supporting us, and we will catch you guys in a couple weeks. So hopefully you guys have a good Halloween. Be safe out there. Don't dress up as clowns and try to get your jollies off because it'll probably end badly. But yeah, be safe. Have fun, guys. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. The cast at Pixelated Paranormal would like to thank you for listening to this week's episode. Pixelated Paranormal is here to tell you tales of the fantastical, the strange, the unknown. Tales that will move you a little further down the paranormal highway. If you'd like to share your own listener story, we would love to hear it. You have two ways. One, email us at pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. Again, that's pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, we have that set up too. Dial us at 707-523-4263. Again, that's 707-523-4263. We'd really love to hear from you. Again, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange.
Typically, this is the time where you may notice we had a little quip, a little funny ditto on the end of our episode where we goof up and prove that we are even more incapable of speaking properly. But
Derpa derpa.
Herpa herp. But for you, a bonus treat, if you stuck around through the outro, we got a couple little personal stories that we want to share with you guys. Add a little bit of extra creepiness factor to our so-called Halloween episode. So without further ado, my wife and I had a pretty interesting experience when we used to live in the big old town of El Dorado. We used to stay out at the Walnut River Apartments. And I won't say which apartment we lived in because not like everyone's going to run out there with torches and pitchforks, but I mean, out of respect for the person who lives in the apartment currently, I won't name the apartment we lived in, out of sheer respect for them. But to set it up real quick, we lived on the second floor.
Apartment 229.
I don't even think there is a 229 out there. We lived in the second floor upstairs on the end of one of the buildings. So we only had neighbors on the second floor on one side of us and then below us, and then of course catty corner. So we only had typically what you'd say is 3 neighbors instead of having like 5. So when we first moved into the apartment, we lived there for I think 3 years probably, I think, if I'm remembering that right. Anyway, when we first moved in, nobody lived next to us upstairs, and nobody lived below us, only catty corner. And I actually knew and was friends with the woman who lived catty corner below us. So anyway, weird things happened in that apartment that we can't explain. And the first thing is in the bathroom that was connected to our bedroom, every night you would smell cigarette smoke in that bathroom. Probably around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, you'd walk in there and you'd smell like someone had just smoked a cigarette, and you just walked in as they, basically put it out. And again, nobody lived next to us, nobody lived below us, and the woman who lived catty corner below us, she didn't smoke. So that was one thing that was really odd. Now, after living there for about a year, we had a couple move in below us. They were aunt and uncle, although they were not aunt and uncle. It was an aunt and a nephew, although they were the same age. But I mean, I'm not going to sit here and do the math, but you get it. They were nice kids. They partied a little bit. They were 21 years old. First people on the nephew, the guy was the hot football star of the time. And anyway, it wasn't too uncommon for us to run into them when we were leaving our apartment or just getting home, as our doors were kind of perpendicular to each other. So anyway, like I said, weekends they'd party quite a bit. And one time, my wife and I, we were leaving the apartment, and we literally ran into the girl that lived there. She ran out of her apartment as we were walking past and physically collided in with us. And you could tell she was drinking. You looked in the apartment, there were beer cans. But there's also something else kind of unsettling that I would never mess with, and that is a Ouija board. They had a Ouija board on the floor in the living room, surrounded by candles and empty beer cans. And the girl says to me, you know, holy shit, you guys got to come in here. And we never partied with them just because that wasn't really our bag. But so you guys got to come here and try this. This is real. This thing is freaky as hell. And we're like, hell no, on that note. And we basically, we were on our way to see a movie, so we just politely said, no thanks, guys. We're on our way to a movie, but maybe next time. And then shortly after that incident, we had a lot of weird things happen in the apartment. And one of the most common things was for our cats. Our cats would sit on the banister and they would stare intently at the corner of the ceiling, and they would follow something move from the corner of the ceiling above the stairs across the ceiling and then back, and then they would start kind of like meowing and clawing at the closet door in our apartment. Something else that was kind of odd, the first apparition that we ever saw there was I was in the bathroom in the hallway taking a shower, and I got out of the shower, grabbed the towel, bent down to dry my hair off, and as I look up, I happen to notice in the second bedroom, again, the door is perpendicular to the bathroom door. Both my cats came flying out of this bedroom, just spooked to high hell. I mean, tails dragging, ears backs kind of slunk down real low, and they just tore like a bat out of hell out of that second bedroom. And I no more had time to say, what the, then a full body apparition walks out from that room and stops right in front of me. Doesn't look at me. I'm checking out like his side profile, and I can see right through him because I had like a War of the Worlds poster hanging up in that hallway just outside the bathroom door. I can see right through him. He's wearing kind of like a typical like Frank Sinatra kind of get up, and he has his hat in his hands. He takes one more step, bends his head down to put the hat on, and it's almost like a wind blew him and he just disappeared like smoke. And I instantly got like cold chills, goosebumps, cold sweats, and I was just freaking terrified. Something else that was kind of odd is one time Shayla was in the second bedroom, and we had a computer desk and we had a drafting table, and each one had its own chair. And she happened to look over as the empty drafting table chair turned about a quarter of a turn, like somebody was sitting in it looking at the desk, and then they turned the chair to face her. And she had thought, oh, what the hell was that? Okay, it's probably the cats. Maybe one of the cats was sitting in the chair and jumped off and caused it to spin. Looks behind her, and both cats are sound asleep in the floor behind her. So that chair just kind of turned on its own. Something else that was really bizarre is one time, I think at that time I was working like an early morning shift at the job I had back then at the deli, and I had to be at work at like 5 a.m. So I'd got up for work, got dressed, and I was walking groggily down the stairs, leaving for work. And as soon as I put my foot on the first step to go down the stairs, I heard, "Have a good day, Shawn." And sheer reaction was just for me to be like, huh? Because I thought it was my wife. I thought she was just hollering out of the bedroom like, hey, have a good day, love you, bye. And so when I said, huh? I hear the voice again, but this time it's like several, like 2 or 3 disembodied voices, and they say, have a good day, Shawn, and they start laughing. And like any self-respecting man, I ran as fast as I could, skipping like 4 stairs at a time, ran out of the apartment, didn't even lock the door, and drove like a bat out of hell all the way to work. It scared the living crap out of me, man. So the next thing that I really remember happening was my buddy Tony and I were playing Xbox one afternoon, and we had this little crappy, like, cheap brand coffee table that was like a foot tall, and we had these really nice wrought iron tripod candle holders on this table. And I know nothing was near either of the candle holders because we were very protective of these, you know, really crappy table but really nice candle holders. And like I said before, they were like tripods, 3 legs. Very heavy lead glass cup. The lead glass cups the candles go inside of were like a 1/4 inch thick glass, and they were probably about 6 inches tall each. The stand itself was probably about another 6 inches tall. So anyway, Tony and I are playing Xbox. The cords aren't draped over the table. The pizza box wasn't anywhere near. The candle holders, the cats were both on the couch next to me. And we both happened to kind of glance out of the corner of our eye at the same time. This one candle holder on its own slides about 6 or 8 inches across this table while it's slowly rotating. And then we both kind of say, what the hell? And then the candle holder falls off the table on its own. And when it hits the carpet, again, man, the table's like a foot tall. The cup holder's like 8 inches off the table. So not even 2 feet off the ground. When this lead glass cup hit the ground, it explodes into, hundreds of tiny little pieces. Like somebody had picked that sucker up and just football, slammed it on the freaking ground. It blows up. Glass goes everywhere. And so I get up, I grab the wrought iron off the ground, and you can see in the table where something had pushed it down hard enough, it had put 3 scratches identical to the tripod legs in that table, and they were about, like I said, 6 or 8 inches long, until the first leg goes off the table and that freaking cup holder had broke. So we literally sat there and watched this thing slide all by itself across the damn table and then fall on the ground with nothing acting on it at all. So really, really bizarre stuff. And then lastly, really, the thing that kind of had us bewildered the most was in our bedroom. Like I said before, we had a bathroom door, we had the hallway door, and then we had a closet door. And one night we had gone out karaokeing and got home real late. I was trying to get some sleep before I had to go to work the next day. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and I could hear the handle of the closet in the bedroom. Like somebody was like tapping it, and it was going like tick, 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 like they're whacking the edge of it, and it was just kind of bouncing back and forth. And immediately I thought, okay, it's the damn cats. Come on, guys, knock it off. So I'm yelling at the cat, stop, leave me alone, just go to bed, I'm trying to sleep. And I can see in the moonlight shining in from the window, both cats are like 2 feet away from this closet door, just staring at it bewildered. So intently that when I'm saying their names, they won't look at me, like just they'll move one ear in my direction, like, okay, we're listening, leave us alone. And so I grab my glasses off the nightstand, I sit up, and I can see the handle of the closet shaking violently up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And all of a sudden, the handle slams down, and the door goes, opens up all the way, and then the closet light turns on, and it scared me so bad I passed out. I out cold, passed out, woke up the next morning, my glasses are, smushed on my face, and I thought, what in the hell was that? Oh, it must have been a bad dream. I sit up, and nope, closet light's still on, and the closet door is still open. And from that day forward, it was not uncommon for, me to get up for work at like 4:30, closet door shut, lights turned off, jump in the shower, get out of the shower, closet light is on, doors wide open. There was a time where Shayla had woke up, probably like 6:30 or 7, had called me at work just to say hi, and halfway through the conversation, she just goes quiet, and I hear the sound of the door open. And she's like, the closet door just opened right in front of her as we're on the phone. Some nights I'd go to bed and you could see the light shining through the door frame if the closet light got left on. So we were really anal to make sure that light was always turned off. And you could go to bed, no light. You wake up a couple hours later and you could see the light shining in around the cracks of the closet door. Or you could leave the room, come back in the room in the middle of the afternoon, and the closet door is wide open and the light's turned on. So we really have no way to explain what happened in that, what caused it. I like to think maybe that the Ouija board obviously maybe opened up some kind of, portal or gateway or whatever, but lots of weird stuff. Those are the main things that happened that are, just unforgettable. Things got so active and just so kind of wild that I actually went down and talked to the manager of the apartment complex because we knew her well enough that I felt comfortable talking to her. So I walk in her office one day and I'm like, hey, can I talk to you? And she's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And I said, no, I need to talk to you. So she's like, yeah, sure, shut the door and sit down. Shut the door, sit down, and I laid it on her and just basically told her the same thing I just told all of you. I was like, look, all this stuff happened, and I need to know, has anybody died in my apartment or next door to us or under us or anywhere near us? And she's like, no, nobody's died. There had been, I think, a couple suicides and a couple deaths out there, natural and stuff like that, and she's like, no, nothing anywhere near your apartment by any means. And she actually told me, she's like, but if it was me, I'd be asking to get the hell out of that apartment and maybe get moved. And we never did. We told her that, nothing ever felt like threatening or violent. So we were going to stick it out until, things got bad enough that we had to leave. And we ended up moving out, I think, 3 years later, or after of being there for 3 years. I think the events probably went on for maybe 2.5, probably 1.5, 2 years, I think, is how long we kind of experienced stuff off and on. But, I'll never forget the day we moved out. you're gathering all your crap, and it never fails. There's always that one thing that you leave in the apartment or the house that you can't afford to lose. And so we'd already had the electricity shut off and the water and everything, and the sun had just gone down. It's probably like 9:30 at night, and we're moving into our rental house, and Shayla says, hey, you know, where's the whatever it was? Where's the blah blah? And I'm like, oh shit, I'll go back and get it. It's in the apartment, like a broom or something stupid like that. And I remember, like, I stood outside that apartment door knowing that the power was off and the lights were off for probably about 5 minutes before I could finally get the gusto to just go in there. So again, like any macho man who's not scared of nothing, I opened up the door, I ran as fast as I could up the stairs, through the living room, into the kitchen, grabbed whatever it was I had to grab, dropped it, picked it up, dropped it again, picked it up, and then ran as quick as I could through the apartment, down the stairs, and out that damn door. And I mean, it felt like the entire time I was in there, you could just feel like 1,000 eyes just watching you. And at any minute, I felt like something was going to grab me or push me, or it was that, you know, kind of deafening silence type feeling. And, you know, I couldn't wait to get the hell out of there. And, that's pretty much it. That's the tale of the apartment. And I remember, on a closing note, I delivered pizzas shortly for a little while after that for some extra cash. And I remember I went to that apartment one time, and it was everything in me not to ask the guy who answered the door, like, hey dude, have you heard anything, seen anything? Is the smoking man still in there in the bathroom? Is the closet door still opening? And I didn't have the guts to ask this guy, because I'm like, you know what? If nothing has happened, I look like an idiot. And if something has happened, then I'd probably stay there all night talking to him about it. So I just I left it at that and never never asked him.
So you've heard me talk about my buddy Tim.
Yeah.
And so he's basically my other brother from another mother. I seem to be acquiring more of those lately. And, growing up, we were really close, and kind of our last year of high school, I don't want to get too much into his family history, but something traumatic in the family had happened. And I was spending more and more time over at the house, and it was almost like second nature. So mom and dad didn't think much of it. I said, hey, I'm spending the night at Tim's.
Yeah.
And he kept saying that his brother Chris kept hearing like tapping on a keyboard. So the basement was kind of like you went down to the main room, and then there was like an archway in the corner, and that led into like this kind of little office area. And then there was a door that led into like the sub pump area where they had like the washer and dryer. Chris turned that little office space into his bedroom, and so while we were watching TV, the only thing that was separating us from Chris's room was like a kind of like a sheet hanging over the archway. And so Tim kept saying how they would both hear this tapping on Chris's keyboard. And I'm just like, you know what? You're both full of shit. You're just trying to get a rise out of me. And Chris was at a buddy's house one weekend, and me and Tim were down there, and we were watching like a movie marathon and drinking. I think we actually found a 24-pack of discarded Keystone Light because there was a railroad track behind their house. And we found a 24-pack of Old Nasty Keystone Light discarded. And, you know, being in high school, we're like, fuck yeah, getting drunk tonight. And cracking open the Keystone Light, watching some movies. And Tim was passed out snoring. And I heard that like tapping on a fucking keyboard. And I'm like, no fucking way. And I, push past the sheets, and the computer is on, but it's on like that screensaver, the old Windows, whatever it was, that had the little thing that would change colors and like, that squiggly pen design where it would just kept growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, it's just the anamorphic blob, just kind of
growing anamorphic blob. And that's all it was. But then I'm sitting there looking at the computer, and I would hear.
That's so weird, man.
But the keys weren't moving, but I could hear it. And then Tim woke up, ran into the room. He's like, "Oh my god!" And then we're both just sitting there, and the keys are just moving. Or not moving, but that sound like the keys are moving.
Yeah, you get that noise. Now, were you guys standing in front of the keyboard when it happened?
Yes, we're standing in front of the keyboard, right? And so we're just like, fuck this, and we both like went back into the room, and he was in the chair and I was on the couch, and we were just kind of eyeballing each other like, okay, well, we're both in the same room. It's safe to go to sleep, right? And we've like just kind of passed out in terror. And about a year later, his aunt and uncle live in Maui, and they'd scheduled a family vacation down there. So they have offered for me to go with them. And I'm going to be the first one to say I'm definitely afraid of heights, and I'm a pussy. So I'm like, fuck no, I'm not getting on that airplane. But I'll tell you what, guys, I will house set for you while you guys are gone. Now, in the upstairs, when you're walking down, the main hallway to where the bedrooms are and the guest bedroom is, there's a stairwell that leads down to the basement. And over the stairwell, his mom has these family portraits from like the 1890s, like when they first started developing photography, like the old silver prints where like they're just kind of creepy looking. And they're in that, they're printed on that glass dome. I mean, these are very old, like almost 100 years old. And it looks like the fucking eyes are following you no matter what.
Always, yeah.
And so I've always had this impression that those fucking things were eyeballing me whenever I was in that house. And so I'm in this house by myself. I'm back in I'm back in the guest bedroom and I'm sleeping. They just bought a little terrier puppy named Rocky, and I had him in the bed with me, and I woke up in the early morning, probably like 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. The sun wasn't quite out yet, but the dog kept whining because he wanted out. Now, I have this thing where like I don't like sleeping with the door open, so I always sleep with the door shut. And he was at the door kind of pawing it, yipping and yapping. And I woke up and I couldn't move. I was experiencing sleep paralysis, and I felt like this heavy pressure on my chest. And all of a sudden the door started kind of like not opening all the way, but like somebody was like opening and closing it really, really fast. So it was just like rattling. And it kept getting louder and louder, like somebody was just like beating the shit out of this door, and I could, I had my head kind of turned to the side where I was laying so I could actually see the door. It was like visible, and this kind of like this light, almost like moonlight, kind of just started to fill the room, and I could see the door just shaking back and forth. And all of a sudden, this deep male voice goes, "Shut that fucking dog up right now, or we'll fucking get it." And I was so fucking scared, I just like passed out. And then when I woke up the next morning, the fucking dog was like huddled in the little crate next to the bed and was just kind of like in this ball, like at the very back of the crate, like it looked visibly scared. And needless to say, I had a hard time sleeping each night in that house till they got home. And told Tim and his mom that story, and they're like, yeah, it's not surprising, we've had some weird shit happen. So apparently they do. There was some shit going down, and whatever was there, I pissed off with a whining dog. So
right. Jeez, man, that's pretty intense. Now, did anybody else ever hear voices or anything like that in that house?
Tim heard some voices here and there. His mom, I've never got some like any coherent stories. Now, she told me some stories from her childhood, but as far as that particular house, she doesn't want to go into too much details about it. So she doesn't really talk.
Gotcha.
So.
Well, guys, there you go. Some little bonus action for you.
And thanks for hanging in there and listening to that.
Yeah, guys. Yeah, thanks for being troopers there. If you were keen enough to see that the outro was a-rolling, but there was still like another 15 minutes of, time on your old podcast app there, then good for you. And if you didn't notice that, and you didn't hear this, and you're just hearing it now after someone told you about it, then surprise!
Yeah. Bonus.
Well,
Easter egg.
So, Easter egg. A little Halloween trick-or-treat for you. How about that? A little Halloween candy. So, again, guys, officially signing off. Happy Halloween. Thank you so much for being here, and we will catch you in a couple weeks.